So early happy Hanukkah to everybody. Um, so this week we not only have a parsha, but we also are thinking ahead to Hanukkah. So let me talk about Hanukkah a little bit. Hanukkah is the only one of the Jewish festivals that we have independent, outside biblical sources, evidence written about it, corroborating it. For instance, there's nothing in Egyptian historical writings that details the Exodus, and even though in the book of Esther, it makes reference to a Persian book of Chronicles where these events were also recorded. So far, we haven't found that book to know what the Persian book of Chronicles was. So we haven't found a book that also tells the story outside of the book of Esther in the Bible. However, the events of Hanukkah are backed up by all the historians of the era in that area, because it was a world-changing event. In fact, the Maccabean defeat of the Greeks actually changed the world. It was a sign of the beginning of the decline of Greece and the rise of Rome. And we have two historical, aside from the historians, we have two historical books that didn't make it into the Bible, First and Second Maccabees. So it's interesting though that they didn't make it into the Bible. The Jewish rabbis outright rejected it from being included in the Tanakh, although the Catholics and the Eastern Christians, they decided that they would go ahead and accept that into their Bible. So, I mean, the question kind of to me is, why did the rabbis decide not to include these books? So, oddly, what the rabbis did was they kind of set the story when it comes to the celebrations of Hanukkah. They set the story of the Maccabean revolt and victory, they set them to the side. Instead, during the Hanukkah celebration, it centers around one tiny detail. That the fact that when they conquered Jerusalem and entered the halls of the temple, they found there was only one jar of undefiled oil left. With that, they were able to light the menorah, and the light miraculously burned for 8 days. So why is it that this miracle of oil and the light of the menorah turned into the symbol of Hanukkah, rather than the more obvious and more major story of the retaking of Jerusalem and the return of God's sovereignty to the land? And I think the answer is the military victory, as amazing and miraculous as it was, lasted for a couple hundred years. The Romans destroyed the temple in 70 CE, AD, and there was nothing left. The temple was gone and the legacy of Hanukkah was erased. On the other hand, maybe the light represents something else that was not destroyed. There was not only a military miracle, but there was a spiritual miracle. That is, the real victory was won in the battle against Greek Hellenism. That the way of Jewish faith and life was preserved at that moment. But that's not all the light represents. This period of time after the Maccabean revolt, after the temple was rededicated, God chose to send his son, Yeshua, the light of the world, to live and die and conquer death. That's the type of legacy that can't be erased. The spiritual victory represented by the light lasted not for 2 centuries, but for over 2 millennia, and is still lasting today. So moving over to the Parsha this week, we read about Joseph. His brothers sold him into bondage. When he was tempted by Potiphar's wife, he chose to be a light. He was tortured and thrown in prison, When two of his fellow prisoners had their dreams, he was a light. If I was put through all that difficulty that Joseph experienced, I doubt I could keep myself to be a light as he was. He knew he had a calling, and he was prepared to fulfill it, even if it meant enduring all that adversity. When Pharaoh had his dreams, Joseph found himself suddenly called up. He was a light in that moment. Because of Joseph's faithfulness, Egypt was prepared for the great famine. When his brothers came calling, he was a light. He rescued them. In reality, this was God's plan. Because of Joseph's faithfulness, he became a type of Messiah. God used every instance of Joseph's story to prepare for the redemption of his people, even the bad stuff. If even one of these moments, good or bad, had not happened, there would have been no story of salvation for Israel's sons. God is faithful through our adversity. A light is always darkest or brightest in the dark. Matthew 25 says, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. Those who were foolish, when they took their lamps, took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. Now while the bridegroom delayed, they all slumbered and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, 'Behold, the bridegroom is coming. Come out to meet him.' Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise answered, saying, 'What if there isn't enough for us and you? You go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves.' While they went away to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward the other virgins also came, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he answered, 'Most certainly I tell you, I don't know you. Watch therefore, for you don't know the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming.'" And if you don't mind me butchering that parable, that's why I'm here right now in this room. Is when I come here and see us praying for each other, when I see each of you talking about what God's doing, difficult or great, in your life, that puts oil in my lamp. And I just learned before coming to service, just reading some things, that Hanukkah, just an interesting note, 8-day festival, obviously, but it was actually a late observance of Sukkot. They weren't able to do Sukkot, because they were hiding in caves and all that stuff. And when they came in, I believe in Maccabees it mentions that they were delayed from dedicating the temple during a 8-day observance. I think it references Sukkot, but I'm not sure. But anyway, the general idea is that was Sukkot. So what better time for God to have rededicated the temple in preparation of his only Son to come and dwell with us, to live among us, to Sukkot with us. So I just thought that was very interesting, and I had never heard that before. I'm sure many of you had already knew that. But in conclusion, let's never fail to continually pray for each other and lift each other up, to help each other be a light, because the night is dark and the time is short. Shalom.